It's that type of a day where you're just like, get it out. Anyways, we're here to talk about just things. MLS started, got me by surprise, but we're here to talk about that and some players that I'll be looking at. Guys, welcome to one of our bi-weekly streams. We do one every Monday, or sorry, one every Sunday, maybe Monday, depending on holidays. And then we also have one on Thursday. We want to look at African football and things in the world, but this is Canadian focus, guys. Welcome to the Africans. We do a little bit of Canadian, a little bit of African content. So if you like either or, make sure you hit the comment, hit subscribe button. I have a plan to go through a couple things. MLS season has begun, so there are teams, and again, from a Canadian perspective, what are we going to talk about when it comes to those Canadian teams? What are we looking forward to? But I wanted to bring up to players that I'm intrigued to watch. There's a couple players that I'm intrigued to see what happens with them, but also I'm also intrigued to see what happens with a couple teams, whether they're Canadian or not, or depending on their Canadian breakdown. We'll take a look at that and talk about that as we go through. We want to take a look at that there. And so, we're here to talk about it. So leave your comments. If you have questions you want to pop in, feel free to do that. But we're going to talk about that here. And today is just basically it's a therapy cleanse. Olympics are done, so that's good. The Canadian in me has had a rough weekend. Davies going down first was a precursor. Promise David going down after that. Olivia Smith leaving with a stretcher again. Two silvers in ice hockey, or ice soccer with blade, you know, with knife feet, whatever you want to call it. Soccer or hockey. That was a little bit disappointing, but we're here to talk about what that is and what that could look like. But the MLS season has started, and it's intriguing to me. The MLS season is very much intriguing to me just because you do have the built-in break for the World Cup. You also have Canadians and players which are intriguing with it. Like you have the three Canadian teams. You have Vancouver coming off of a year where they finished as the top team, make it to the finals, fall to Inter Miami. And they've made some changes as well. What's in their future? TFC seems to be trying to create the I was once called up by the USMNT team, and we'll see what that turns into. And we'll see how that. And then CF Montreal, I don't know what Montreal is trying to accomplish. I saw someone on Twitter was saying the other day they may have the worst professional team in Quebec this year, and they're just starting a new CPL team. And so I'm very much curious as to all those aspects. There's different things that come up with them, which makes me very kind of curious to look through, see what could be, what will happen with it. But let's start off with something that we probably are a little bit more comfortable with. Let's start off with the Canadian champs, the best Canadian side on the MLS side. Let's talk about the Vancouver Whitecaps, who on the pitch, you're hoping that it continues to improve the situation. But I mean, off the pitch, you have the questions of where will they play? Will a stadium situation be figured out? And again, there are people who definitely talk much more eloquently and much more informed on this. This is me from just the outside talking and looking at it. And so if we just focus on what's happening on the pitch, I think they're the most intriguing in terms of can they repeat that success? They started off the season with a win over Real Salt Lake, which we're excited to see what that's able to look like. But I think the most interesting thing for me looking at that side was the fact that they made the choice to they moved off of two Canadian wingers, right? We saw Ali Ahmed, who moved over to Norwich, and has got off on the ground running there, looking very good in his moments that he's been able to be on the pitch there for Norwich. But then in the other move, which I found a little bit surprising, especially after a player like him moved, was you had Jaden Nelson moving to Austin. And I think Jaden moving to Austin was a little bit curious to me just because I didn't expect Jaden Nelson to move. Like with him moving first, it made me think, okay, well then clearly Ali's probably staying. right? And he didn't. And so we're looking at Vancouver. There's still Canadian prospects on that side, but are they able to repeat that? They were able to find some players to fill in on the wing, which I think will be good for them, right? But not having Nelson, not having Ali Ahmed, that's going to be very intriguing to see what they're able to do. I think if you're looking for a Canadian MLS team to do well, you the sure thing or the more sure thing, the more trusted investment is definitely the Whitecaps. You still have Thomas Mueller, you still have Brian White there. You have interesting youth coming in the looks of what they're going to try to do as attackers and strikers. Ryan Gold is still injured, but I mean, look at the names of Jivan Bodwell in the middle. Liam McKenzie still listed with the side as we go. But looking up top, right, you have Thomas Muller as a second striker, but then between Nelson Pierre, Haitian American, Ryan Alumi, Tunisian Canadian, Brian White with Thomas Muller, you would think you could find something within there. Izzy Jackson as Jackson is someone who could step in and look very good within those spaces. That's something that that's the big question for me there, right? I if they can maintain that type of dynamic play on the wings, I think ultimately, I think they serve themselves well to possibly repeat. I think other Western side though will good. I mean, we saw what LAFC is doing, and that's a team I'm intrigued with just because of the amount of Canadians that are on it. But between the LAFC, San Diego, you'd expect probably the Galaxy to have a better step up coming through. But they're a side that I'm very much curious to see what they're able to do. We'll talk about them in a minute. Don't worry. Yeah, are they? This you see the Canada U20s that looks like the best in the region. I don't know if they look like the best in the region. They'll have to do it on the pitch for sure. But we'll talk about them at the end because I think they're a very interesting side as we get ready to get going for U20s that gets going tomorrow for some sides. But Vancouver for me, Vancouver's very I'm very intrigued. And I think if you're looking for a side that could repeat and perform well, I think that's the side you want to hope for. That's the side you're going to invest in. I think they're the more calmer. You still have Isaac Bomer, young goalkeeper looking well. You have Adrian Zendejas, goalkeeper, American Mexican goalkeeper. But to me, where I'm very much intrigued, Adakubi still coming back, Bilal Halbouni still coming back from injury. To me, it's it's really all about what we can get going between them attacking midfielders and then moving that into specifically the wingers because Emmanuel Sabi on the right feels about well Bruno Caicedo and or Kenji Cabrera I think can fill in well young South American prospects that can look well in that space and then Treki Salabi you know what you're getting from him in terms of that. I'm very much curious in terms of what they can do. I think they will probably, like I said earlier, will repeat within the solidity of what they've done. Looking at what the lineup was yesterday, right? You have AZ Jackson, Sabi, then Brian White up top, Thomas Mueller, and Cameron. Bo Berhalter and Kubas there. That was solid. Javon Bodwell and Ocampo getting onto the pitch yesterday. And then you also had Kenji Cabrera as well. So you'd like to see that, especially for Javon getting onto the pitch, sitting to that Kubas space. I think that will be very intriguing to see what they're able to do. But AZ Jackson gets the goal scoring. They're intriguing to me. I think they're the ceiling for I think Canadian teams in the MLS. I believe that wholeheartedly based off that. And I think probably top four in the West is within their grasp. Maybe they can push that further up. That's where I think I'm expecting the finish there. The next where I have no idea where they can finish, Toronto FC, because still didn't look solid yesterday. They got going first game, still didn't look solid, but at the end of the day, hey, it's day one. Get some of the kinks out, get the whole team going, and we'll see what it is. But yesterday, a 3-2 loss to FC Dallas in a game where just, man, bad defending at the end cost them a goal. And there's questions that they're going to have overall. right? Yesterday they started Derek Etienne as your 9, Jordy Mihailovic, Jonathan Osorio as your 10, Malik Henry out wide, who looked decent there. Sal Cifuentes, Kosi Thompson, Richie Larea, Walker Zimmerman, and then Kobe Franklin was your starting 11. I, the amount of it, I'm surprised that they go with Etienne when you have Jules Anthony Vincent. But again, this is a player from Montreal who got opportunities, but then wasn't getting opportunities, but now was just missing with those opportunities. And so I feel that at that right back position, you see Raheem Edwards coming in for Kobe Franklin. I wouldn't be surprised if you see Robin Fraser go to a little bit more of the veteran presence when it comes to those fullbacks for a little bit better cover. I mean, they're proven MLS players. We'll see what they do, but if the Josh Sargent news comes through, I that could look good for them. Possibly, we'll have to wait and see. Maybe that gives them the 9 that they need moving forward. But to me, I mean, for the first game, I know there's players who are trying to work their way into. I know if you're a Jonathan Osorio, that's probably a player who's thinking trying to work their way into that starting, or not that starting, trying to work their way into the 26 for the World Cup. I feel like this team is too deep for that. Like, I know that he has the armband, but there's got to be enough talent where Oso is maybe the first midfielder off the pitch in that sense, right? Jordy moving into the middle and then finding something else. The other thing I would say is Larry Savanovic. I know he's young. He's a player I think we got to start playing him for TFC. See what he can do in this type of a level. Not to say that Thompson isn't looking well, but like you would like to see a little bit more awareness on the goal between him and maybe Perlman. Maybe we see some more opportunities, something that could look a little bit better for them. They are injured as well. So once you get that, Malik Henry will probably be off when you get a player like Theo Corbin to come back off the pitch. But starting the season off a 3-2 loss, you like to see the goals. Not encouraging that you had 2 goals in the first half already, but then getting a goal with Derek Etienne tying it up, and then immediately after conceding to Musa in the 74th minute. Not the most ideal situation for them. But I think TFC is such a wild card for what they could be. Right? They could be a side that finishes top 6. They can be a side that finishes at the bottom of the East. It really comes down to how quickly this all comes together. I think with a player, if the Sergeant move goes through, I think that at least gives you someone who can finish at the top, but also someone who can play the full length of the pitch, both defensively, but then again, pushing up offensively, giving you that target and can make those runs and move in. Did they overpay for him? I mean, 20 mil for him. It's a choice. I'd say it's not my money, but hey, again, it's not like you don't have a fresh Gilles Vincent on the pitch, on the bench. It's not like you don't have Emilio who's sitting there fresh off on the bench, ready to come in. So to me, I'm curious to see I'm not quite sure. They could be interesting. I don't know side of the Canadian sides in the MLS. So then the how bad could it get side is CF Montreal going to San Diego for the first day, getting a 5 spot put on them is not ideal. And when you get that, what is going on in Montreal? What is going on in Montreal is the question that we ask ourselves. The squad value of 32 mil is not ideal, but I mean, going down 5-0 and it was they were worked in the second half. First half, it wasn't too bad. 1-0. But then once the second half started, it just kept coming and it would not stop. All right. And where are you finding Lattori with a yellow, Sam Piet as a CDM, Escobar, Thorolson? Like I know it's one game, but that's a little bit of a worry for me. It's a worry just because for that side, yes, you weren't expecting much, but you were expecting a little bit better than what you were given. And so for me, that's just a ooh, Montreal. It's only the first day. Maybe they get it together as they move. Again, Montreal, takes a while before they get back home and start playing. So hopefully on this road trip they can figure stuff out, move on, and look good by the time they reach home, which is about 5, 6, 7 more games to go before they get back there. But yeah, in terms of the MLS sides, I mean, Vancouver is definitely that who I'm highest on of the Canadian teams. Then you have Toronto, which is a bit of a wild card. And if I get anything from Montreal, I think that's a win for me. But as the title of the video suggests, what are players I'm intrigued? Canadians I'm intrigued about this year in the MLS. It's a World Cup year. Players are fighting to make it onto the roster. Some players are fighting to make it into the squad as it stands. And so for me, I want to talk about players that for me I'm intrigued by. If you got players that you're intrigued by, feel free to jump it on, throw it in there. Let me know which players you're intrigued by overall. But I am very much these. This is my list. Is basically what I'm saying. This is my list. You may have a different list, and that's fine. But this is my list of things that I'm intrigued by, and that's where we're gonna go. Let me know in the comments which team or players you are the most intrigued by. And we said team or players. I mean, I'll start with some obvious ones because clearly there's some obvious ones we can look at. But the first obvious one for me um, is a team, again, outside of the Canadian sides. LAFC is intriguing to me just because the Canadian content is rich with this side. It's a very rich side overall. I think that's what makes them intriguing to me. You had Steph Eustachio, who's there for a loan for this year. You already had Mathieu Choignard, who was there, and we saw them actually spend some time platooning on the pitch together, right? Yesterday in their 3-0 win over Inter Miami. But they are intriguing to me because mainly it's a midfielder where Steph Eustachio will get minutes, and if Mathieu Choignard could come in and supplant and support, that's two Canadians who are more than likely on your 26 for this World Cup, getting regular minutes. Oh, by the way, there's Thomas Hasal, who's on the bench as a goalkeeper. Oh, and by the way, Ryan Raposo, who's there as well. I think that's the first intriguing thing I'm looking at because I think this is a team that their midfield, if as long as they're feeding that top line of Bouanga, Son, Martinez, I think that's a sign that they can just put up solid nines. They'll be in great game fitness, great shape, and have some good match sharpness on them for a side that is also in Championship Cup. So CONCACAF Championship Cup, they'll be playing there as well. So that's my number one side. I'm getting to him. I am getting to him, Prince. Don't you worry. I am getting to him. And so that's the number one team. It's probably the one team. I mean, I know Sporting KC with both Stephen Afrifa but really Zoran Basong I'm more intrigued with because that fullback depth. But team wise, non-Canadian MLS teams, I am watching I am watching LAFC very closely because there's a lot of action that's going to impact that. On the flip side, I know Dane St. Clair going to Inter Miami is, on paper, great profile. He's on the team that's going to do well. I don't know if Dane is going from a side that was very much always good defensively and then counter it and then buckle it down to a side that may try to do that, but they may not have the legs for it, which means you're about to leave Canada's number one in a position where he is going to be more exposed into moments. It's not going to be the same cover he had in Minnesota. And I have a fear that maybe we're going to see more score lines like we did. Not that he's not a good goalkeeper, but I fear that with Miami, yes, they may not be playing an up and down style, but getting back defensively, giving up moments in half spaces, giving up moments within the thirds. They may have the savvy. I don't know if they always have the leg, and I think that's going to leave your number one, Dane St. Clair. That's going to leave him exposed more. So he's gonna. I am. I'm not as excited. Like it's one of my things when he moved was I don't think it's was the worst spot to go to in the MLS. If he's going to leave the ML, if he's going to leave Minnesota, he was either going to go to a top side, or I'd say he should have left the league altogether. Now he's still getting consistent minutes, great. He's still going to be in great high profile games, yes. But I think based off the side, based off the makeup of the side, he's going to have to prove himself a lot more in goalkeeping situations, and we'll see if he's able to stand up to it. I hope he can. I hope he can, but one game is definitely not the right measure to judge a goalkeeper based off what their season is going to be. I think ultimately that's where I'm very much looking forward to see what he's able to do here. But one game in, it's one of the concerns of a team like that. He's not going to have the same type of defensive cover that he would have had in Minnesota. And so, because of that, he may get shelled a few more times. Does that mean he's a worse goalkeeper? No. I don't think Crapo Max would be doing enough to really push it one way or the other. So, we'll have to wait and see. But that's right off the bat, two teams that I'm intrigued. But really, LAFC because the Canadian content, Dane St. Clair because of the because of the profile. He's gonna have a magnifying glass with him because yes, it's the best keeper in the league. So giving up three, he's gonna get the blame because hey, in this game, no, because hey, they didn't score. It's not like they lost the game like 4-3 or 3-2. It was 3-0. He was mediocre at best in this game, that I do agree with. But he's gonna have to if Inter Miami struggles, no one's going to blame Messi. No one's going to blame the outfield players. It's all going to go on the goalkeeper because at the end of the day, goals are what's going to matter. And so Dane is more of a cautionary. I hope it doesn't go wrong, but we're watching cautiously from a distance. Definitely watching cautiously from a distance. That's two. Third one that I'm very much intrigued with. This team came off of a win, but it's the player that I'm very much intrigued with. Played 65 minutes yesterday in their 2-1 win over Orlando City. And the player we're talking about is Jaquil Marshall Ruddy. Marshall Ruddy left CF Montreal, right? Oh, and that I do agree with, right? They do want the championship cup, so they'll have to pick and choose their moments for that. But I think he's the goalie that can help them do it for sure. But it's going to come down to do they leave him too exposed? Do they whether that because that's kind of what happened to Inter versus Vancouver last year in the semis. They were just out they were just outmaneuvered on the pitch. And so if you're going to leave a goalie that has spent most of his time with a lot more defensive cover and a lot more of a defensive team, we'll see how it works out. I hope they can pull it off because I think that's a better profile for him. But we'll see what he's able to do. Go from an older team. Let's go to a younger team. Uh, Red Bull, New York Red Bull. I am intrigued by that team, but they got a lot of young guns here, right? Julian Hall, I'm pretty sure Hall is a young gun. Yeah, 17 years old. He starts for them, gets 2 goals in his debut. Again, we're not going to judge a team based off of what they do in their first game, or we're going to lament them for how bad they looked in their first game. But New York Red Bull is a very intriguing team with who old friend of the show, Michael Bradley, former TFC man, now coaching. But there's a lot of youth on this side, right? Between Dos Santos, between Cowell, Cade Cowell, yeah. Like this is going to be a very fun side. And with Marshall Reddy, who last year, I mean, he was getting consistent starts, he was getting consistent minutes when he was loaned out to Charlotte. I was a little surprised he didn't get more of a look with the national team, but fullback depth wise, they just said it's Richie, it's Zorahong, the song, it's Nico Seeger when Alistair is injured, and then when everyone's healthy, Davies will be that. So it feels like Jaquil Marshall Ruddy is probably fullback five, and that's being the most optimistic. But him now at a team where he can finally just get those minutes again after off of a year where he got those minutes. I mean, he leaves Montreal after uh, the uh the, the incidents, a lot of racist DMs going to him, and like it seems like we were talking about this all year, right? It seems like this is still going to be a thing, and it's always going to be a thing when people just decide to be bozos on the internet. But he has an opportunity to really carve out time, and because he's at New York Red Bull, I think his opportunity to move really opens on a young team. And it's funny because you look at a player like him and you forget sometimes that he is still young, right? Jaquil Marshall Ruddy is 22 this year. He turns 22 this year. June 16th, he's 22. Right. He's 21 right now, and he's a player that's been a professional since what, 17. It feels like he's been here forever, but it really makes you wonder and wish if TFC had just sold him. I think at the time, the rumors with him was I think was one of the Premier League teams when he was 18. Was I think it was Arsenal wanted to buy him up. What different his trajectory would have been if they would have just let him go? Because since then, he was sold. He was traded to Montreal. Montreal wasn't giving him too much run. Then he went to Charlotte. I think here within the Red Bull system, a lot high pressing of a side, I think that can do him well. And I think that makes him a very intriguing type of a player where I think he could really be a player that I'm very excited to see what he does this year. Getting health wise, I mean, let's hope he stays healthy. His contract doesn't expire until next year at in the end of the year. So December next year, and next year also is when they try to switch over to the European schedule. That's going to be very intriguing also to see how that fits in. But he's a player at his highest was for transfer market had a value of 3 mil. Now he's at about after the time with Charlotte is putting back up to about 1.5 mil. Now he's at New York Red Bull. I think style of play, a little bit up and down. I think he can really fit in. He can really settle into that. And I'm very excited to see what JMR can do within that system. Does that maybe get him into the could that get him into the World Cup roster? I think he should be in the World Cup roster, but I don't think he'll make it. I think the roster is very much set again. Optimistically, I think he's fullback number five. If you're being as optimistic as possible, realistically, he's probably closer to 6 or 7 based off of where they are. But we'll see what happens. I think good play. Maybe he gets a look last minute, or maybe he gets brought into training right before, but then gets the break before they go through. But he is Jaquil Marshall Ruddy. He is a player that I'm very much intrigued to see what they do and what he's able to do now finally at a club where he can play and look decent. Now, on a flip on again, moving on to another player. A player who has the potential but is in a situation where I think the situation will create opportunities for him. You'd hope. And again, this is just my list, so you may agree or disagree with it. That's me. But Alexander Gboglo, who's at CF Montreal. To me, he's a player that I'm intrigued by, less because of like his talent is intriguing, but the situation at the club feels to me like a situation where he would get more opportunities to play if the season goes off the rails. Right? They still have a nice set of players that they'll probably put in front of him. But if the season goes off the rails, Alex feels like a player that you'll just put in and say, let's see what the kid can do. You might as well just say, hey, he's the homegrown, he's 18. Let's see if he can develop here. Let's see what we can do with it. And maybe that's a quick sell for him, for the club. Maybe that's looking for opportunities for the player. But Alexander Guboglo, I cannot speak today. Guboglo. Alexander Guboglo, who's there, Haitian descent, Canadian, has spent a little bit of time with the U18s for Canada, but he's a player that I'm intrigued by for me, just based off of what Montreal may be, what that will look like overall. I think Montreal could be, and he's a right back, left back, right midfield type of player. I hasn't played in the first game, but again, based off of the mess that could be CF Montreal, he might be a player that gets a lot of minutes, and then it might be okay, what does he look like overall? That is a name that, just for the environment, I'm intrigued by. Another name, another Montreal name, or Ottawa to Montreal name. We have Charles Emile Brunet at Nashville. Just signed, winter signing for him. Didn't play in their opening game, but draft pick coming from the draft. With Nashville, that's a team that's going to have their sights on rebounding, looking better within the season. Can he carve out a space within that roster? Right? For a player like him, he is a midfielder. And like on that team, you have Wibben Macias, backup nine, Sturridge, Madrigal, Mukhtar, Espinoza. It's going to be tough for him, so he's probably going to be a two, a Nashville FC two type player. But I am very much wondering what he may look like. We mentioned him off the bat as a player who left Vancouver, but Jaden Nelson, who was at Austin FC this year, leaving for some more playing time. Is he able to get that playing time there at Austin FC? Right, left winger playing there, only 23, and that's the thing. Names that you've heard about, like I remember watching Jaden coming up through the U17s back in 2019. So only being 21 to me, or 23, sorry, is wild to me. But he came off the bench in their first game. But he's intriguing for Canada. Their 2-2 draw versus Minnesota. He's intriguing to me just because, like, that left winger position is always going to be. I think it's Ali Ahmed's on the national team for the World Cup. I think your wingers for Canada are Ali Ahmed and then Tejan Buchanan. Behind them, that's where it gets interesting, right? Liam Miller could be intriguing. Is he able to look good? Then I think there's a battle between Jacob Schaffelberg and Jaden Nelson. And to me, based off of availability, it's Jaden Nelson. Jaden Nelson had objectively the better season. He was healthier. I know Schaffelberg had moments at the Copa America. That's 2 years ago, though. And we're not going to judge. We can't use 2 years ago's performances based off of this current production. I think that's where I'm always going to push and say, if the player is playing well right now, you got to factor that in. He's been a player that's been around the team. He's been into camps. He started against Guatemala when they were given that friendly there. And I think coming into the March friendlies, especially, you have a Tunisia, you have an Iceland, how they're able to break down in those moments, I think that's going to be very a big. It's going to be a big moment to really show who can really get into, because that first winger off the bench is going to be very much intriguing. I think right now it's Jay Nelson, based off of what he's done. Again, a start here for Austin for what he's been able to do here. Loved that. No goal contributions, I believe. Just making sure on that. But if he continues to get starts, right? In this minute, he goes 69 minutes, goes off. No goals for him. But if he's able to look good in those moments, I think he's certainly winger number 3, or at least winger number 4 with Liam Miller playing well in the championship. Well, those are some of the names. That's my list. So you have all of LAFC because Stephanie Stacchio. You have Mathieu Choignard there. And that's intriguing for the midfield. You have Dane St. Clair. I think they're going to have big matchups at Inter Miami, but I think style may leave him a little bit more exposed in moments, and he's going to have to come up with big saves. And if he's able to do that against MLS competition, maybe that gets him ready to go in against into the World Cup. You have Jaquil Marshall-Rutty at New York Red Bull. I think, again, year 2, it's a new club for him, but it's year 2 of him finally continuing to play well, having consistent starting minutes. He has young players around him, so maybe that youth that become just a fun team to watch overall. You have Alexander Goblo, Alexander at CF Montreal. I think if the situation turns untenable there, I think it becomes very intriguing to see what type of minutes he gets. And then Jaden Nelson, Austin FC. I think that's a very intriguing, that's a fair thing to take a look at for me in terms of if he can continue the good play that he had. He had a good year at Vancouver last year, but if he can now be consistent, if he's a consistent 70-minute type winger for his club, I think he shows well. And I even think for Jay Nelson, even if it turns into him just becoming that spark type of a player off of the bench, I know he wants the consistency, he wants the minutes. The World Cup is definitely on his mind, but I think he could certainly look very good getting ready for this World Cup at Austin. And I think it'll bode well. So that's my list. If you guys are on this rewatch, let me know what your list looks like. What are the players you're looking for when it comes to that? The players you're intrigued by, whether they're Canadian or not. But with that being said, let's get to, because it was mentioned, and it literally starts. It literally starts tomorrow. I thought it started today, but it actually starts tomorrow. CONCACAF U20 tournament. We already did a video breaking down the roster. It's a very familiar roster. Right? It's a very familiar roster in terms of if you were following the U17 teams from last year, it's very familiar to that roster and that setup. But just to go through all the particulars so you are aware. So in CONCACAF, the top 6 teams are given a bye to the final. So those top 6 teams are the United States, Mexico, Honduras, Panama, Cuba, and Guatemala. Those were your top 6 teams from the last U20 tournament. Actually, from the last 2 U20 tournaments. So the top 6 teams of the last 2 U20 tournaments, because in 20. Yep. Because in 2024, we had another set of teams go through. Then in 2022, that was the Cuba year. But so those teams are already into the final championship qualifying, and that happens at the end of July to the beginning of August. So literally right after a couple weeks after the World Cup, then we get the championship round for the U20s. What's at stake? The top 4 teams. So the semifinalists are on their way to the U20 World Cup happening next year. But because the US is hosting the Olympics, it's the highest seeded team, not the US, gets the second spot for the Olympics. And so once we get to the championship round, say if the final is between the US and Mexico, Mexico gets the spots to go to the Olympics. Now, if it's two teams not United States, so say it's I'm just using the top six here, but say it's Cuba and Mexico, the winner of that goes to the Olympics. Honduras versus Panama, the winner of that goes to the Olympics. So, because CONCACAF likes the pre-seed teams, those six teams, United States, Mexico, Honduras, Panama, Cuba, and Guatemala, are already seated in that competition. The next set of teams were put into six spots. The top five pots had five, and then there's two teams with six groups. They were all seeded accordingly. So in pot one, you had Costa Rica, El Salvador, Canada, Dominican Republic, Haiti, and Jamaica. Group pot two, Trinidad, Tobago, Nicaragua, Curacao, Antigua and Barbuda, Suriname, Puerto Rico. Pot three, Bermuda, Aruba, St. Kitts, Nevis, Belize, St. Lucia, and Guyana. Pot four, Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, Barbados, and Martinique. Pot five, Dominica, Saint Martin, Saint Martin, Anguilla, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Turks and Caicos. And pot six, French Guiana and Bonaire. So schedule starts tomorrow. There are six. There are five groups. No, there's six. There's a number of groups, and the winner of each group moves on to the championship round. So same thing that the women had for theirs. Top your group and you go through. It's similar to, but not similar to the U17s for the men, where it's win your group and you're en route to the World Cup. This you're going to the championship round of the qualification. So, with that being said, here are the groups. If you are unfamiliar, and games get going tomorrow, so we're gonna do our best to try. We're gonna catch a couple Canada games. We'll have a few other games going on as well as we speak, but we will do our best to keep you appraised of what's going on. But yeah, Group A: El Salvador, Suriname, Belize, Grenada, Saint Martin, and French Guiana. They get going tomorrow, and they finish on the third. Most matches finish on the third. Group B: you have Jamaica, Puerto Rico, St. Kitts and Nevis, Cayman Islands, Turks and Caicos, and Bonaire. Group C: Dom Rep, Antigua, St. Lucia, British Virgin Islands, and Dominica. Group D: Haiti, Curacao, Guyana, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Anguilla. Group E: Costa Rica, Trinidad, Tobago, Bermuda, Barbados, and Saint Martin. And then Group F: Canada, Nicaragua, Aruba, Martinique, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Topping the group means you are on your way through. You join those other six sides, and life is a lot easier for you as you go. So that's what it will be. And we already talked about the Canadian roster, but for those of you who are unfamiliar, the Canadian roster, as I pull it up for you, is we did this. Yeah, I did the whole video for this, but we're gonna do it again. The roster as is. They let us know that a couple players weren't available for the U20. So Ryan Alumi wasn't made available because of the MLS season, as was Alexander Guboglo, who we mentioned earlier. Ryan Alumi, interesting dual national, Canadian Tunisian. Canada plays Tunisian friendlies. I wonder if he gets put onto that squad as they go. And they're letting us know who's not available due to injury, which is very interesting for the names. Yeah, George Booth from Reading FC, Emerick Fosting from Vancouver FC, Jean-Jacques Netsiaro from Montreal FC, Walter Sedin for, Canadians. If you are familiar with that, that is one of the Sedin brothers. one of his sons, so a nephew and a son there was unavailable from there, who's a Hammerby, and then those two other players. But the roster is you have Nathaniel Abraham, Marcel Bishbekov, Anton Bosenberry, Zane Bruno, Richard Chukwu, Sahil Deo, Aiden Evans, Timothy Fautier, Owen Graham Roche, Shola Jimo, Dylan Judolson, Sergei Kozlowski, Lucas Lima, Liam McKenzie, Emmanuel Marmoleo. It's interesting that the Whitecaps let Liam McKenzie go, but not Ryan Alumi. But then that's because you have an injury. So trying to get him in the moments. James McGlinchey. Let's keep going. Killing Michelle Back, James Rhodes, Aguila Sadek, Felix Sampson, and Max Vogel. And then the alternates are Josh Nugent from TFC Academy, and Noli Peter from the Whitecaps Academy, and Elijah Roche from the TFC Academy as well. So that is the U20s. And look, based off of my rooting this year, pain is coming for me. But let's see what they're able to do. I'm intrigued. This is a group that I won't say that I'm very high on. I like the group because we saw what they did at the U17 World Cup. So very excited to see what they do now as another group. For some of them, this is not the first time playing together, and for others, this isn't the first time playing together. So we'll be together with the coach. The coach is Andrew Olivieri, who's in charge of the Youth Accelerator Program Director there. Games matches 26, U.S. Virgin Islands, Martinique on the 28th, Aruba on the 2nd, and then Nicaragua on the 4th. The games are in Nicaragua, so the way that CONCACAF's been able to do it, they've pretty much put the number 1 and number 2 ranked teams together for the final matchup. And it's pretty much worked out where that final matchup is the big matchup and the winner goes and the loser goes home. So, to their credit, CONCACAF has done a good job to kind of foster those big matchups at the end of the competition. A lot of eyes. We saw that at the U17s where the number 1 ranked team played the number 2 ranked teams in most of the groups. And it mattered really for most of them, minus the Trinidad Mexico one, where Mexico was way too far in advance. The one thing I'll say with these competitions, goal difference matters, right? I know their parents may be in the stands, but goal difference matters, right? We saw Costa Rica at U17 put 26 on the team, and then drew Puerto Rico, right? We saw Mexico put high numbers on a team, go through, right? We saw Jamaica put 12 against Cayman Islands, which gave them the goal difference, and then they went out and beat Canada. And so goal difference will matter. So yes, the spirit of competition is great, but in this type of competition, secure the win and then secure the win again. And that will make a difference because when you want to be entering your final match day with less to worry about versus having all the factors, you don't want to have to think what a tiebreaker does. Goal difference is the number 1 tiebreaker, so make sure you have a bigger goal difference than them. Worst case scenario, and I think that'll be the key thing. I think it'll be interesting for that. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I don't like that there isn't a U23 tournament, but it seems like CONCACAF doesn't really want to do an Olympic qualifier. Same thing. The most they did for Olympic qualifier was actually on the women's side, where they said the number 2 and the number 3 sides for the World Cup qualifiers, they'll have to go in a home and away aggregates to decide who goes to the Olympics, which was nice. It was nice to see, hey, more competition, home and away, a reason to visit to see what teams could do. But I think it would be really great if we could have a U23 competition, but it doesn't look like they're going to do that for that. But that being said, that we're about an hour's through, and I'm very much intrigued. Thank you, everyone who has given a comments. I know it's great you're living your life there, but that I'm intrigued with. Other interesting news. I mean, could 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 Canadian players just stop getting hurt this weekend? I'd really appreciate it. The big Canadian news was Alfonso Davies leaving the Bayern game with And as just a random voice on the internet, looked at it. I was like, "Ooh, what are common injuries post an ACL tear?" It's like, well, meniscus, LCLs, MCLs, but also if it's a knee sprain, what it could be. They said a hamstring issue. Initially, before they said a hamstring, I thought it read like a lot like a knee sprain, but we'll have to wait and see what it is. But the estimated, as I'm gonna pull up Bayern's, because we got to look at Bayern's medical statements. We have to look at Union Saint Gilloise, and then we got to talk about the women because a player like Olivia Smith leaving the pitch today, which we're hoping for good news. We are hoping that we only get good news from that. Right. So the speedy recovery there. We'll go to the update as it reads, and we'll talk about that there for those who had missed. All right. So it's a torn muscle fiber. We'll pull it up. You can see it in case you've missed it or you need this therapy. There's not enough maple syrup to drown the sorrows that we're going through right now. There's just not. Okay. We're going through it. All right. So it's a torn muscle fiber in the right hamstring in their 3-2 win over Frankfurt. This was confirmed by examination. Denver will be signed for some time. The estimated time that it said, there was a Twitter that said about 3 to 4 weeks, roughly. And before I go into trying to be a WebMD doctor, I am not. I am a communications major. Okay, but the simplest way to say is this: if it's a hamstring tear, a small tear is usually 3 to 4 weeks of recovery. Same thing with a knee sprain. Um, a longer, and that's like a grade one. And I said probably grade one knee sprain was what I was estimating before we said it was a torn fiber in the hamstring. But it's usually 3 to 4 weeks for that type of a recovery, and that's where you're hoping it heals back up. But then the tear may still be there. If it's a grade one, if it's a 2 to 3, you're looking at about 3 months. Looking at about three to 4 months, and right now, since it's February, if you want to do the March, April, May, June, 3 to 4 months, that cuts it really tight. That becomes an issue. And with hamstrings, they become wear and tear, and you have to manage them. And so for me, I would say for a player like Alfonso Davies, I know we were looking forward to see him back. He is the captain of the team. We're looking forward to see him back with the squad. I'd say wait until June. Right. I would say wait until June. Right. Initially, when he was first injured with the ACL, I said March. And now with this, I say wait till June. Leave him at the club. They can deal with it. It's You're asking a player to fly continent over the ocean, play off short rest, and then having to rest them well on a system that is very much predicated on a lot of speed of running and pressing and pushing forward. And if you push too much, dealing with that, him and Bombito are two players. I'm saying let's make sure they're healthy before we even try to push anything further. But Davies, it's looking like 3 to 4 weeks is the injury for him, which is both great. It could have been because it looked non-contact. I could understand how everyone held their collective breath. All right, we went through it. We went through it. But I would say probably not going to see him. More than likely not going to see him at the March friendlies for Canada, which is fine. But then that means you probably have Larea on the left. Oh, we don't know what Alistair Johnson is. He was at the gold medal game, so hopefully he's moving well and gets back and starts playing at Celtic. But probably looking at him, you're looking at Richie Larea at your left back, and then probably Nico Segura as your right back for Canada in those games. And then we see what happens. Yes, sir, DNA, I see you. Hey, we just talked about the U20s. DNA, we just talked about the U20s, but all the best to Jamaica and Trinidad and those. I think it'll be a fun competition. That is for certain. So that is the news on Davies. And then what felt like an hour later, then we had to deal with losing sleep over Promise Dave, who had a collision. This is the statement from the club. Keep you up to date. He was taken to the hospital yesterday. No fractures on the examination. He returned home. Will go more scans, and they'll have further tests next week. I think for a lot of us who were hoping for him to get more opportunities to play, that's a setback, especially when you see a player like Kyle Aaron start off with a bang when it gets to get off a bang when he got to the championship and looking good there. So I think Tanny looking decent is good as your striker too. Joe David coming back from a hamstring injury as well. The striker position is a little bit thin, right? Daniel Jefferson not getting as many minutes as he was before. Huh. And this was going to be the window where we said, oh, this is where promise takes over. But health, you always want to wish the best for health for the players. So that's what's happening with those two strikers. That was the men's side. That was the men's side. And then we had Olivia Smith leave for Arsenal with a neck brace, and we're waiting to hear what is going on with that. That was, and especially a few weeks before the She Believes Cup, no, a week before the She Believes Cup, to be perfectly off. And that makes that roster very, very intriguing because for the Canadian women, it was a player that we were looking forward to see and say, okay, what could they look like with Olivia Smith as the 9, maybe as the 10, maybe as a winger? We'd have to wait and see. But this has not been a fun Canadian weekend, okay? Okay. It's silver tears. They're silver tears. I will not deny it. But if Olivia's not available, right? We don't know anything. We're hoping for that she's all right. That's the one thing with the player. You're always hoping whenever let's hope they're all right. Let's hope it's the best case scenario. Let's hope it's a speedy recovery. I know we had the concussion midway through last year, and then we have this year. We've had some hamstrings. We had some things. It's a player that she's playing, for lack of better words, she's playing big woman football. And not to say that, and there's been many conversations about just the type of foul she takes, the type of beating that she takes. How do you protect a player like that outside of the refs? It might be formation, right? I feel like playing her as a second striker might be a safer place for her to be. She can still get on the ball, but then, hey, football still is going to be a contact sport. It's going to be a physical sport, and so you hope that she can recover. You hope she continues to learn as she goes through. Not all this isn't say choices she's making, but the physicality and the being that she's taking, you hope for her sake, because again, as a player for me that I've watched since she was young, U15, getting opportunity to go to senior camps, multiple U20s, she's a high potential player, and she's continuing to be first Canadian woman to go for a mill. Health health is your wealth, and so I'm hoping it's not too serious, hoping she recovers. If that takes her out of the She Believes Cup, it does sour it a little bit, um because you would like to see what she can do against the Argentine. It's really what she could do against the Colombias of the world, and then see what Canada then could do versus the USAs of the world, to see kind of what they look like there. I don't think they'll be at that level in this tournament. I hope it's a lesson learned, and then they can regroup. And by the time they get to World Cup qualifiers, then they could be firing on cylinders that make them look really good. But in the hypothetical situation she's not available, who do you bring? I think there's a lot of interesting names that you could bring. Clarissa Laracy is a name who's at the Houston Dash. Kayla Briggs at who's at Michigan State, could be a good name. Maybe they reinforce the roster in a different way. Nikayla Small would, again, you know how I feel about Nikayla Small. You could look for other forwards who could maybe, give them a little bit of a confidence boost. And Amanda Allen, it wouldn't hurt her to get into that spot. I know you still have the names like Adriana Leon and Co. But if we were going to try to see new players, let's see more new players, right? So for me, I'd say, yeah, bring if, and this is on the premise that if Olivia Smith isn't available, bring Kayla Briggs, bring a Nikayla Smalls, bring a Melissa Kekic with a nice U17 tournament. An Alyssa McLeod could be a possible name as well, right? I think there could be a list of names that could be very intriguing to come in, but 3 injuries. We know news on 2, waiting for news on the 3rd, hoping. Actually, let me do a quick scan to see if there's any new news on Olivia Smith. Not seeing anything. Not seeing anything in terms of news, but we'll wait and see. We'll probably have some news a little bit later on. But I mean, speaking of good news, we had Kadisha Buchanan make a return, which was great. I think that was it's a very well. She wasn't called up for the She Believes Cup, but she's certainly a welcome sign back on the pitch. I think it's great that center back because I think once you get the center backs healthy, between Jade Rose, Vanessa Gilles, Helena is injured, but you bring in, we could finally get back to the back three for this candidate WNT, the XNT. I think that could be very good, but I think Kadisha coming back is great because, as you saw, see her running onto the pitch, her first action in over a year, and you're happy to see the player there. Great recovery. Happy to see her back on the pitch there for Chelsea, and that only bodes well for her as she comes and works her way back. But that about wraps it. That's all I really wanted to talk about. I needed to talk. I needed to let it go. So the recap. MLS season started. I'm high on the Whitecaps. Off the pitch, I know there's clouds, but on the pitch, I think they're a team that could really look good. They could continue to progress well. I think they could repeat. I think top 4 in the West is possible for them. The wild card team is TFC. I don't know what to expect from them, and TFC is basically once we were called by the USMNT team looking like they're looking for, and that's okay. We've seen them do that before in their days when they brought in the likes of. I'm not saying they're trying to repeat it, but it is eerily familiar. Trying to find a solid midfielder and a striker who were USMNT players. Now Jordy Mihailovic isn't Michael Bradley. They're 2 different positions, and in the same breath, Josh Sargent isn't the same as a Josie Altidore. But you see them kind of understand the formula they're trying to build there, and then I have no idea what's going to happen with CF Montreal. We talked about players I'm excited to see. The whole LAFC team, just because of the midfield between Stephanie Stacchio as well as a player like Mathieu Choignard, to see them continue to get consistent minutes. I have concerns with Dane Sinclair, but he's in a high profile spot. So the better he does there, I think it'll look good on him. But if it goes bad, all eyes will be on him. We talked about Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy at New York Red Bull. I think with a young team with a name that we just mentioned, Michael Bradley, I think that's a player who can very do well. Alexander, who's at CF Montreal, another interesting name that could look good. And then Jaden Nelson, of course, at Austin FC could look very intriguing, could look very good in terms of what they could do. And then talked about the U20s getting going starting tomorrow. Again, win your group and you're going to the championship round that starts a couple days, well, a week after the World Cup finishes. And then you also have updates on injured Canadian players. Davies looks like a hamstring tear, out for about 3 weeks, which feels like a grade 1 tear or a grade 1 sprain in that sense. You have a Promise David who hasn't um, no fractures in these X-rays, but then we also had unfortunately Olivia Smith leaving her game today. And if she's not available for the She Believes Cup, again, we are hoping that she's fine. And once we know more information, we're hoping for a speedy, healthy recovery. But if she's not available, we talked about a few names we can bring in as well, whether that be Kayla Briggs, Melissa Kekic, Amanda Allen, Clarissa Laracy, Kayla Briggs. Uh, yeah, Amanda Allen, Kayla Briggs, any of the Stewart twins, the other Chukwu twin, Kayla Briggs. Uh, you get the drift. Um, and then just what's going on. So we're gonna wrap it up here. We'll be back throughout the week. Thursday, we're gonna talk about all the international friendlies that we have confirmed, both men's and women's. We got our African sides getting ready for the World Cup and getting teams ready. We'll talk about that. Just try and shore up, I guess. If not, it'll just be me on a Thursday afternoon talking about friendlies coming up, what I'm excited about, and the more. But thank you guys for spending this hour with me. Hope you're enjoying